I started doing justice work about 5 years ago. I was in grad school, and one of my professors, I went to them with a lot of data, local data, and divided it out by race and sex and different identity groups. What I found was that Joplin was not immune to what we see nationally, and that is that certain groups of people are treated differently because of their identities. Right now, race is a really big one that we're talking about in Joplin, and the one that I tend to focus on most. So my professor asked me that $1 million question, well, what are you going to do about it? And I wasn't ready. I was still processing the data that I had read and accepting that this was happening right here in my hometown, that racism was a real thing right here in Joplin.
All my brothers dying for nothing, the system sinking and sunken. I feel the hatred, corruption for being color, the function. Don't understand it, I get it. Like putting sharks against fishes, they make it harder to finish. When we have lost from beginning, we fight for justice, forget it. Won't get justice where we live when we getting guilty.
I probably spent more time on this particular question than any other question. Kind of unique. I'm the mayor pro tem. People elected me to that office. I served the city in a capacity as an elected official, but also a person of color. But the caveat to that is I still have experiences today that make me just shake my head and just kind of well up with frustration. And an example of that would be if I just mowed my grass. I have a nice home. I live in the suburbs. 2-car garage. I have 2 cars, a 70-inch TV hanging on the wall. I'm a pretty nice guy, I think, pretty reasonable. I pay my taxes, all that kind of stuff. But if I've just been working in my garden or I just mowed my grass and I got my grass cutting shoes on and my cut-off shorts and an old T-shirt and I got to run to Walmart and grab some milk real quick, I'm looked at differently if I'm going down the aisle that Little Miss Johnson is on and she sees me coming, she's going to hug the aisle and grab her purse like I'm some kind of threat. Now, if I engage Mrs. Johnson in a conversation and she finds out that, hey, this guy's a manager at his job, he's on the city council, oh, he's the mayor pro tem, her attitude changes immediately. Now I'm somebody that she can talk to and maybe even trust, and she didn't have to grip her purse so tightly. But why did you have to grip it tightly in the first place? Why am I still perceived a threat because my skin color is darker than yours? Don't get that every day. Actually, don't get that a lot, but it happens often enough to where it makes me just frustrated that really still today, it's 2020 and we're still acting like that. Because the conversation can change. And, I heard our former mayor, Melody Colbert-Keene, talk about this a while ago. And now that I'm mayor pro tem, I'm experiencing the same thing. You can walk in the room and people can meet you and they're right. Hey, yeah. How you doing, Keenan? Everything's wonderful. And then somebody might whisper in their ear, well, that's Keenan Cortez. He's on the Joplin City Council. And as a matter of fact, he's the mayor pro tem. And their attitude completely changes. Now I'm somebody they want to talk to and they want to get to know and maybe talk about some issues that they're having. But when I first walk in the room and they don't know who I am, then they keep that arm's distance away from you. But once they find out, hey, this guy might be somebody, then the whole attitude changes. And what I want everybody's attitude to be is it doesn't matter what color of my skin is. Walk into a room, it should be a welcoming event. Everybody should be recognized that they are somebody and not just because of a title someone may hold or a stature that they may hold in the community. Why can't we just all get along?
I haven't really experienced it in the way that possibly some friends of mine and my older brothers and sisters have, and older family members have experienced it. My son had run in with it before, being stopped for no reason and asking to search his car. And he told them no. And I think it was kind of weird, but they stopped him and told him he was weaving in and out of traffic and that. Then he's like, Mom, I promise you I was not, I was doing this. And, kids, sometimes you're like, yeah, were you or were you not? And he's like, no, Mom, I wasn't. And I was like, okay. So do we need to call down there and see what's going on and whatever? And so I did, because never had a problem with that. And they're like, well, the officer wrote this, that he was driving erratically in the traffic and going across the line 2 or 3 times. And I was like, well, can we see that? Or is it, is there a way to see that? And I think this was before the cameras actually came through. So, but he was like, no, we don't have, this is just the report we have. And I was like, okay, well, that's here nor there. But why did you have to search his car? If you thought maybe he had been drinking, then you should have gave him a breathalyzer test, and you either going to take him in or you're not. But you searched his car for no reason. And so, that was frustrating for me, very frustrating. But like I said, just blatant out and out, and some of the types of racism that are going on now and discriminations and things, I haven't had an overload of that. And I'm thankful for that.
Experiences pertaining to race in Joplin. Some of the most memorable. This was my first summer in Joplin. After my junior year at Ozark, I interned here in town. And I remember being at the Sonic on Stone's Corner. This was like a Saturday, I believe. Sonic on Stone's Corner. And I was getting ready to preach at the church I was interning at that Sunday. And I was outside on one of the benches or whatever, Bible open, prepping a sermon. And this truck pulls up next to me. They roll down the window. If I'm not allowed to say this, we can redo it. But they rolled down the window and the guy looks at me and he's like, nigger. Drives off. Comes back around. Nigger. Drives off. So this was Saturday, preached on Sunday. Me and one of my best friends who are white were back at that Sonic on that next Monday. The family I was staying with that summer lived right close to that Sonic. We went back to that Sonic. And we were outside on the benches again. And a different person, because I vividly remember that face, a different person drove by. Nigger. So this is my first summer in Joplin, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? And about a week later, I was pulled over on Main Street for remaining in the left lane downtown. Yeah. I mean, I pulled over, asked the cop for a explanation. Why? And he said, you remained in the left lane. And I'm thinking, we're in the middle of downtown Joplin. I don't know which. And he was adamant about it. And after I questioned him a bit, he gave me a warning and let me go on home. But it's stuff like that I can't help but question what the motivation behind that was. Everything makes me want to assume. And probably the days leading up to that led me to assume this is obviously race-related. So those are the bad, but good experience. I mean, the church I go to now, especially the other leaders in the church that I help lead, they've been textbook almost unknowingly and unintentionally been textbook models for what racial reconciliation looks like. So that's been, great. So good and bad.
Growing up, one of my best friends, she was a white girl. And I grew up with my Black family. And her grandfather knew my family very well. Her grandfather and my grandfather went to school together. And we would go to her grandfather's house after school. And every time I would walk in, he would tell me a Black joke. And so I would just kind of look, and I'm thinking, what? Well, he would tell me the joke. And then right after, he'd say, oh, come give me a hug. And then he'd say, oh, the food's ready. Go in there and eat, And so I'm like, okay, well, I told her, I said, does your grandfather know that I'm half Black and that I was raised with my Black family? And she says, oh yeah, he does. He knows your grandpa very well. And you're the only one he tells those jokes to. Well, when she told me that, that's the moment that I realized that he's trying to relate, or he's trying to, he thinks that that's something that's going to connect us or relate, we can relate in some way. But that's just not the way it is. I helped with the Easttown mural here in Joplin. And during that, there were a lot of disgruntled community members, I would have to say. And so they didn't really know what was going on there. All they knew were we were painting people on the side of a building and some other images. And we actually had people come up, and one man pulled up one day in a truck and he said, "What are you guys doing here?" And so we let him know, we're painting a mural on the side of the building to represent Easttown and the history of Easttown. And he said, "Well, you're not going to paint a bunch of Black people up there, are you?" And so the artist, which happened to be a white man, he was there, and he turned around and he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, we are. We're going to paint a bunch of different people up here, all colors." And the man got mad and drove off and was yelling, different racial slurs out of his window.
So I'll start by saying that I have been very much embraced, and doors have been opened for me, and a lot of opportunities provided for me by people who were not people of color. So I've had some really, really great experiences. A lot of my key mentors and also people who have impacted my life heavily are not people of color, but they're my community members. And so that in itself has been really good as far as my experience being a person of color in Joplin. But I will also say that living in Joplin as a young person required me to almost become numb to the racism. I often found myself in situations that I was dismissing things that I knew were racist or inappropriate, that I was befriending people who I knew had racist ideologies and perspectives. And I was accepting compliments like, "You're different than the other Black people." So I definitely had kind of a consistent or a continuous experience of having moments that people were racist towards me. All the way back to elementary school, when I used to wear my Girl Scout uniform and I was a brownie, and the kids would follow behind me and call me the brownie in the brownie uniform on the way home from school. And so as much as I loved being in Girl Scouts, I dreaded having to wear that outfit to school to attend the meeting after school. I've had people yell at me out of their car windows on many occasions, just randomly yell racial slurs. I've definitely felt like there were times that my race impacted my treatment when it came to our educational and our criminal justice system. I can remember when I was 16 years old driving down the road, and I had just pulled in front of my house, and an officer pulled me over. And next thing I noticed, they're telling me on their loudspeaker to put my hands outside the car and open the door that way. So when I got out, I start to turn around to be like, "What's going on?" And they instantly start yelling, screaming at me, turn around. And I realized when I glanced back that there was a row of officers with very large weapons pulled on me, and they had bright lights, so it was hard to see. But I was just really in a moment of shock. That instance ended with me being searched by a male officer, and also my car being searched before they told me that it was mistaken identity. I was driving an 82 Buick Regal. It's yellow. So it was hard for me to imagine that there was someone else in Joplin at that time that looked like me, driving a vehicle like me, that justified that level of force being used. So I definitely have had some difficult experiences around race in Joplin. But even though I mentioned those, that was not the predominant experience that I had. Those experiences stick with us, and those experiences stand out in our minds. And so it's easy to focus on those. But the truth is the majority of the time I felt supported by my community, and I did not feel like I was being oppressed or discriminated against because of my race most of the time.
So my experience in Joplin with regard to race have been overwhelmingly positive. And yet there are these pockets and moments of time where it is very negative. And so I've had opportunities here with regard to professional growth. And I started in food service at St. John's a long time ago and quickly moved into a supervisor role, and then moved into the medical staff office, and then moved into the professional roles. But every now and then I would have a moment where something would be said with regard to maybe an off-color comment and undocumented friends, or here just recently within the last 4 weeks, we were out at a local restaurant here with some friends, and a gentleman at the bar turns around, and he's probably had one too many drinks and just wants to start small talk, and goes around the circle asking what people do and where people are from, and gets to me, and I say, like I just said, I'm from Joplin. I'm as much from here as I'm anywhere. And he says, "Oh, your kind has it tough here." And I just wondered, okay, it's all in split second moments. Okay, where's he going to go? Like, is he going to move this into maybe a positive direction, or is he going to double down maybe on some foolishness? And he did the latter. And he said, "I try to hire laborers all the time and can't get them to show up, or when they show up, they say they're experts in carpentry and can't do basic things, or they're on meth." And he's looking at me the whole time. And so I look at him and I say, "Well, I'm a hard worker." Now, is that the totality of my experience in Joplin? By no means. But does that happen? And is it part of my experience? Yes. And there's this part of me where it's like, me as a person, I'm continually having to grow. And if that's me, then I would have to assume that the city I live in is probably going to continually have to grow. So I don't allow the experience to become normative of everything in my life, but it is part of it. Now, when I compare it to Chicago, which is interesting, Chicago is as segregated a city as many cities can be, which is part of the tension that I have in these conversations. Diversity is what you purpose. So when you go to Chicago, which can be a very diverse community or city with regard to percentages, you could very easily find yourself living your whole of your existence in one community. And so there's Little Mexico, Little Italy, there's Jewtown, Chinatown. I grew up in a predominantly Hispanic community right next to a predominant African-American community. And those two communities had, and still have, as much tension as what I have heard and learned when we lived in Nashville with regard to the South between different races. So it's been tough at times. And as I've gotten older, I have found the ability to not make it normative, because it used to be. I'd have good experiences, but then I'd have one and I'd let that become overwhelming the predominant frustration I had inside. And I've learned to swap it. No, when it happens, I'm going to let it be what it is. It's negative, it's bad, it's hurtful. I try to be gracious in calling it out, but I don't let it become everything, especially with regard to Joplin, because I do think we have a lot more good here than we do bad, but it doesn't mean we can't grow.